In March of 1986, Gaura Govinda Maharaj was voted in as an Acharya in the ISKCON GBC Guru system. Unfortunately, at that very time, there was a big controversy going on whether or not to reinstate Bhavananda. Bhavananda had been allegedly involved in homosexual activities. GBC at the time, Atreya Rishi, told me that there was stacks and stacks of papers and reports regarding Bhavananda's homosexual activities, including apparently homosex in the Holy Dham. There were some reports that he was having sex with taxi drivers in the Holy Land of Vrindavan. So the priority at the time for most people was to remove Bhavananda and at least clarify that gurus, Krishna's successors, acharyas, pure devotees are not engaged in homosexual activities, especially not in the Holy Land. So I had expected somebody like Gaura Govinda Maharaj to stand up and say, wait a minute, we have to get rid of Bhavananda, and we have to get rid of the supporters of Bhavananda. We can't have people reinstating deviations in the role of Krishna's successor. But that's not what happened. Instead, Gaura Govinda Maharaj compromised with the reinstating of Bhavananda, and he was himself voted in as a guru at the time. So this was referred to as the homosexual certification of guru process, because they certified a homosexual, simultaneously certified Gaura Govinda. Shortly after this incident, Nirantara Das, I think his name is Nick D'Angelo, he sang a song, There's Homosex in the Holy Dham. He was making fun of the whole process of reinstating Bhavananda, as well as all the people who went along with that, like Gaura Govinda. And the temple president at the time said, well, this is great, we've just given Lord Chaitanya the gift of a homosexual acharya for his 500th anniversary. So many people were upset with the whole incident, and they were upset with people like Gaura Govinda for going along with that. Simultaneously, Kirtananda was sitting in a big seat, wearing a gold crown, and he was covered with the hands of 50 boys, which many people thought was also a homosexual problem, and there were other homosexual problems. So, in other words, why is Gaura Govinda going along with this whole homosexual guru thing? That was a question people had at the time. But there are many other questions. For example, what is Acharya voting? Gaura Govinda is voted in by the same people who are voting in homosexuals. What kind of process is that? Which previous guru was voted in by deviants? The GBC says the gurus are sometimes engaged in illicit sex. So how are people who are engaged in illicit sex able to vote in acharyas in the first place? You know, Gaura Govinda never answers these kind of questions. Of course, there was another big underlying problem to all this. What's happening to all of the children? The children are being forced to worship homosexuals as their messiahs, and Bhavananda and other homosexuals are bringing in a whole bunch of homosexual molesters into the schools. Isn't this going to cause a whole lot of trouble for the school children? And that was an issue being brought forward by myself, Sulochan, and others at the time. We're saying, by Gaura Govinda's cooperating with this process, he's jeopardizing the children of ISKCON, because the children are being forced to worship homosexuals, and those homosexuals are bringing in a whole bunch of homosexual molesters into the schools. So what's happening with the children? And of course, as it turns out, thousands of children were in fact molested under this process. So it was very alarming, really, that Gaura Govinda Maharaj just acquiesced and went along with that whole process. And not only acquiesced, he supported it. He a number of times stood up and defended Tamal, and Tamal was the biggest supporter of Bhavananda, and so on and so forth. So he was a supporter of that system. Now in 1988, Gaura Govinda Maharaj was requested by the leaders to write a paper to explain how their gurus are having so many problems. So he wrote a paper, Gurus Become Demons. And actually, when I visited Gaura Govinda Maharaj, his followers handed me his Guru Tattva booklet, which basically is the same text as that paper. Anyway, it didn't take long. After March 1986, Gaura Govinda Maharaj put his rubber stamp of authority on the homosexual guru process. So a couple months later, Sulochan was murdered, because those of us who were protesting the homosexual guru program were in severe jeopardy, because now the supporters of the homosexual guru program were saying, well, Gaura Govinda is with us, so that means, you and Sulochan, you guys who are critics You're blasphemers, you're demons, you're unauthorized. We have the authority. We have the scriptural authority of Gaura Govinda behind us. So it put a target on our backs. So when I met with Gaura Govinda, I told him, I said the GBC is making homosexuals into Vishnu-Pad acharyas who are worshipped as Krishna's successors, and he agreed. That's what they were doing. But he said his job was to cooperate, tolerate, and work with those people. He also said Kali Yuga has entered the highest places of the ISKCON movement. So, wait a minute, we have to cooperate with homosexuals posing as God's successors. We have to cooperate with Kali Yuga. Kali Yuga has entered ISKCON. Let's cooperate with Kali Yuga. Well, wait a minute. Where does Prabhupada say we have to cooperate with Kali Yuga? We have to cooperate with homosexuals posing as Vishnu-Pad acharyas. He does not. So I told Gaura Govinda, I says, my idea is we should just worship Prabhupada. And he says, oh, that's not in the tradition. Oh, you can't worship pure devotees? That's not in the tradition? What? No, that is the tradition. The whole tradition is based on you have to worship a pure person. So I said, I'm sorry, but that, my understanding of the tradition is that you have to worship the pure devotee. He said, no, you need to worship a living person. So notice what's going on here. He's telling me I'm not living. I'm not even alive, according to Gaura Govinda. He says, oh, you're not even alive. You need a living person. I'm the living person. Obviously, you're the dead person. So that's also, notice, that's setting me up to be attacked violently. Because I'm a dead person. I'm not following the tradition. I'm an offender. I'm out of the loop. I'm not only out of the loop, I'm already dead. So, notice what's going on. People are being beaten. People are being murdered. Anyone who objects to the system is being violently attacked. And Gaura Govinda said, well, that's the tradition that we need to follow. Now, to Gaura Govinda's credit, he did criticize some of the other gurus, but that's about as much as we can say, because now he's establishing another bogus principle. He's saying that gurus should be criticized. Srila Prabhupada said it's a severe offense to criticize the guru, and Gaura Govinda is going around openly telling people, hey, I'm criticizing the guru all the time. I'm always criticizing the guru. Well, wait a minute, that's a bogus principle. You're not supposed to be criticizing the guru. So he's establishing a tradition where Kali Yuga is being worshipped as the Acharya, where homosex is being worshipped as the Acharya. That's the tradition of India? That is not India's tradition. In sum, then, there is no example in the tradition of India's gurus where a guru was voted in simultaneously with a homosexual. There's no tradition of voting for gurus, period. Where is this found? It's not found. There's no tradition of cooperating, tolerating, and working with homosexual gurus. There's no tradition of, in 1993, standing up and saying we need to keep the main leader of the homosexual guru process, Tamal, in power, which is what Gaura Govinda Maharaj did. He stood up and said, yeah, we need to keep Tamal in the post of authority. And what does that mean? That means all these homosexuals and molesters and everybody else are going to stay in ISKCON. It's defending the corrupt process. That is not taught by Vaishnavism. So Gaura Govinda adopted the Mayavadi idea that the soul does not originate with Krishna, the soul originates in the Brahman or in the impersonal atmosphere. So on many levels, Gaura Govinda Maharaj was attacking Prabhupada's statements. But what amazed me was he's going through all this trouble of trying to discredit Prabhupada on the Jiva Tattva issue, but he's not paying any attention to all the children being molested. And we could go on here with many more examples, but these are just a few. We're just trying to point the way. The bottom line is that India's culture has been very much distorted and misrepresented as a culture which supports illicit sex in the post of Acharya and Messiah.